Well, hi everybody. We are continuing with our work here. I should say hello, hi. I have my Darth Vader headphones on. We are in Raise and Initiations webinar on part 2 of Raise and Initiations. We're on program number 27, and we've been linking up the various threads, so to speak, these energy streams which emanate from certain of the chakras. With respect to these threads, man is fivefold, 2 threads coming from the soul and 3 coming from man, from the personality. We have the soul with 2 threads, one anchoring in the heart and one anchoring in the head, and for man we have a thread from the heart linking the spleen, linking to the spleen, and perhaps one wonders to what extent this has the quality of vitality and life. We also have a thread coming from the solar plexus, and this thread links eventually with the love petals of the egoic lotus. Very interesting. And one coming from the head, which links with the knowledge petals. So the head is a center of both will and as well as will, it's a center of knowledge, a mental center. So it's involved with the first aspect and the third aspect particularly, and it has that part within it, of course, which is the central 12-fold lotus, and that's linked with the second aspect. So these threads become a little bit intricate. I'm just reviewing a little with respect to man. The life thread is not only the Sutratma, but blends the consciousness thread as well. And from the perspective given in these pages, Antahkarana is considered the consciousness thread. When the 5 threads, 2 of the soul and 3 from man, are united, they make their way to the throat center of man, and he becomes a creative agent. And perhaps from there we can find the creative thread in process or emanating. I think he's going to elaborate on this as we move ahead. It's just worth reading this. We can learn much through the use of the pictorial and visual imagination, and I suppose we are being asked here to visualize according to what Master DK is saying. This bridging must take place from the physical to the vital or etheric body, and this is really an extension of the life thread between the heart and the spleen. So we have here a linking between physical and dense physical and vital, and the thread involved there is the heart-spleen thread. It's really worth reviewing this because it's not easy to keep all this straight. Then from the physical and the vital, regarding them as a unity, to the astral and emotional vehicle. This thread emanates from or is anchored in the solar plexus and is carried upward by the means of aspiration till it anchors itself in the love petals of the egoic lotus, as I was saying. And then there's one more here. From the physical and astral vehicles to the mental body, one terminus is anchored in the head and the other in the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus. And then the triple threads created by man are anchored in the solar plexus to head and heart. Okay, that was from another area of the book, but I brought it in for a summary value. And then this is important. Advanced humanity is in process of linking the 3 lower aspects, which are called the personality, with the soul itself. through meditation, discipline, service, and directed attention. And this is the way the linking occurs from the personality to the soul. Now, when this has been accomplished, a definite relation is established between the sacrifice or will petals of the egoic lotus and the head and heart centers. So there has been a thread being sent to the head center, and there has been a thread emanating from the heart center, thus producing a synthesis between consciousness, the soul, and the life principle. Okay, so the sacrifice petals then are also involved. We've seen the knowledge petals involved from the head, the thread from the head. We've seen the love petals involved with the thread from the solar plexus. And on the way towards these petals in the on the way towards these petals, okay, this is not the right one here. They have to pass through the other vehicles. So probably for the solar plexus, there's a passage through the astral body, and with the passage, well, they have to pass through the astral body and the mental body, but the solar plexus is particularly linked to the astral body, and this thread from the head, which passes to the knowledge petals, has to pass through the mental vehicle. I suppose it's all quite intricate, and we should one day see all of this drawn out by someone who has the kind of exactitude to do it. So personality and soul are linked, and when this has been accomplished, a definite relation is established between the sacrifice petals, sacrifice or will petals of the egoic lotus, and the heart and the head centers, thus producing a synthesis between consciousness, the soul, and the life principle. And consciousness, I think, can be related to the head, and the life principle to the heart. So let's just put this in. There will be a link from the petals of sacrifice. Oh, okay. From the petals of sacrifice to both the head and the heart centers. What we find is that there are different types of links involving the same centers. For instance, the soul links to the head center and to the heart center, yes, but then there is a thread which links from the heart center to the spleen, and from the head center as well, from the physical and astral vehicles to the mental body. One terminus is anchored in the head, and the other in the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus. So the same center can be home to more than one thread. That's the thing to keep in mind. And now I think he may elaborate on this in the section that we are going to study at this point, going on from page 451. I can perhaps indicate the nature of this process, and he just uses the word indicate, he doesn't use the word elaborate, in the following manner. I have stated here and elsewhere that the soul anchors itself in the body in 2 points. Okay, and when he says body, of course, he probably includes the etheric body. There is a thread of energy which we call the life or spirit aspect, anchored in the heart. Okay, well, in both the heart center and, well, I think it affects the heart directly. Remember, we have said that the life thread in the man is dual, consisting of the life of the sutra atma proper, and also the consciousness thread. And I think he says that Further up here, let's see, it's quite intricate. Yes, the life thread, the silver cord of the Sutratma is, as far as man is concerned, and that's the important point here, as far as man is concerned, dual in nature. The life thread proper, which is one of the two threads which constitute the Sutra Atma, is anchored in the heart, whilst the other thread, which embodies the principle of consciousness, is anchored in the head. So even the thread which embodies the principle of consciousness is part of the life thread for man. I think if I had a little more fifth ray at this point and seventh ray, I could lay all this out. But I'll leave that to some of my colleagues who are better equipped in that manner. All right, so let's see if we can keep this relatively straight. There is a thread of energy which we call the life or spirit aspect, anchored in the heart, and it is one of the threads which comprise the dual life thread, when the life thread is considered from a certain perspective. Okay, it uses the bloodstream, as is well known, as its distributing agency. The blood is carrying much more than simply the chemical properties. It's carrying vitality. And through the medium of the blood, life energy is carried to every part of the mechanism. We can see the reason then, can't we? We can see the reason why the heart center and the spleen are linked, because the heart is carrying vitality to every aspect of the vehicle, and the spleen is especially the center which processes vitality. Really, there is a pranic triangle. It's a triple thing, and it also involves a center immediately above the diaphragm and a center between the shoulder blades. This life energy carries regenerating power and coordinating energy. Interesting to think about the heart in relation to coordination. Jupiter is a planet of coordination, Jupiter in the heart center. So let's see here. Jupiter and the heart center in relation to coordination to all the physical organisms, and keeps the body whole. Now, and again, Jupiter, we understand Jupiter, the planet of wholeness. Okay, so a thread of energy, which we call the life or spirit aspect, anchored in the heart center, and to whatever degree actually affecting energically the heart itself and the bloodstream. It uses the bloodstream, as is well known, as its distributing agency, and through the medium of the blood carries energy. Life energy is carried to every other part of the mechanism. So when we are fatigued, we can look to the heart center and its stimulation, its relationship to the spleen. This life energy carries the regenerating power, revivification, we might call it, revivification and coordinating energy to all the physical organisms, and keeps the body whole. Okay, we do remember that the Tibetan is a master in the field of esoteric healing, and that he will be one of those externalizing masters who particularly will teach the ancient healing techniques. There is a thread of energy which we call the consciousness aspect, or faculty of soul knowledge. I suppose it has something to do with the knowledge petals, anchored in the center of the head. And this is interesting. In the center of the head, what does he mean by that? Is this the pineal area? Is this the pineal area or the pituitary area? Well, it seems that the head center goes directly down towards the center of the head when extended in its physical concretion. It controls that response mechanism which we call the brain, and through its medium it directs activity and induces awareness throughout the body by means of the nervous system. So, we have the head connected to the nervous system and the heart connected to the blood stream and the arterial and venous system. Okay, now these two factors, which are recognized by the human being as knowledge and life, or as intelligence and living energy, are the two poles of his being. And what about the energy of love? Okay. Of course, in the heart, there is also the factor of love and the 12 qualities of the heart. In Dina 2, I think it is, page 660, they give 11 of those qualities, relate very much to the love energy. And also within the head is the factor of love found with the heart, through the heart within the head center in the head, or above the head. The task ahead of him now is to develop consciously the middle or balancing aspect, which is love or group relationship. And DK takes us to education in the new age, page 26 and 27, 32 and 33, and 93. Maybe we should take a little trip there. 26 and 27. Let's see how that goes. 26. Okay. We can read a little bit of that. And it goes over, yes, okay. The Sutratma is the direct stream of life, unbroken and immutable, which can be regarded symbolically as a direct stream of living energy flowing from the center to the periphery and from the source to the outer expression or phenomenal appearance. It is the life. It produces the individual process and evolutionary unfoldment of all forms. It is therefore the path of life, which reaches from the monad to the personality via the soul. Okay, this is clear. This is the thread soul, and it is one and indivisible. After all, life is one, right? It conveys the energy of life and finds its final anchor, as there must be other anchors as well, in the human heart, and at some central focal point in all forms of divine expression. Naught is and naught remains but life. So this is interesting. I think he's incorporated these words into the rays and initiations. The consciousness thread, Antahkarana, is the result of the union of life and substance, or of the basic energies, which constitute the first differentiation in time and space. This produces something different, yes, which only emerges as the third divine manifestation, as the union of the basic dualities has taken place. He's incorporated this paragraph too, hasn't he? It is the thread which is woven as a result of the appearance of life and form upon the physical plane. Speaking again symbolically, it might be said that the Sutratma works from above downward, and is the precipitation of life into the outer manifestation. The Antahkarana is woven, evolved, and created as the result of this primary creation, and works from below upward, from the without to the within, from the world of exoteric phenomena into the world of the subjective realities and meaning. Okay, well, okay, let's include this because he has included some factors in these two paragraphs which are not mentioned in the rays initiations, but many of them are. So let's look at this, and we will this is from Education in the New Age, and it's 27 6 and 27, and maybe I better make it into a different color so we will know that we are having something a little different going on here. I'll make it green. All right, so we'll know, and I'll also reduce its size so we'll know that it's an import, as it were. So there we have Sutratma and consciousness thread, or Antahkarana. And I think it's very important, this idea of from within to without for the Sutratma, and from without to within, Antahkarana. I'm going to go back here and just read a little more. The path of return by means of which the race is withdrawn from outer emphasis and begins to recognize and register those inner conscious knowledges of that which is not phenomenal has already through the evolutionary process reached a point of development wherein some human beings can follow along this path from the physical consciousness to the emotional and from the emotional to the mental. Okay, that's the average and the normal. That part of the work is already accomplished in many thousands of cases, and what is now required is facility and the right use of this power. This thread of energy, colored by the conscious sentient response, is later colored by the discriminating consciousness of the mind, and this produces the inner integration which makes a man eventually an efficient thinking being. At first, this thread is used for purely lower selfish interests. It steadily gets stronger and more potent as time goes on, until it is definite, clear, strong thread reaching from the outer physical life, from a point within the brain, straight through to the inner mechanism. Yes, and by that inner mechanism we must mean the soul. This thread, however, is not identified with the mechanism, but with the consciousness in man. This means, through the means of this thread, a man becomes aware of his emotional life in its many forms. Note the phraseology, in its many forms, forms of emotional response, and through it he becomes aware of the world of thought. He learns to think and begins to function consciously on the mental plane, in which the thinkers of the race, a steadily increasing number, live and move and have their being. Increasingly he learns to tread this path of consciousness and thereby ceases to be identified with the animal outer form and learns to identify himself with inner qualities and attributes. He lives first the life of dreams, that's the life of the astral plane, and then the life of thought. Then the time comes when this lower aspect of the Antahkarana is completed. See, Antahkarana is a much larger idea here than the specific link between the mental unit and the monastic permanent atom. He expands upon this and gives it a larger significance. This lower aspect of the Antahkarana is completed, and the first great conscious unity is consummated. The man is an integrated conscious living personality. The thread of continuity between the three lower aspects of the man is established and can be used. It stretches, if such a term can be used, my intent being entirely pictorial, from the center of the head to the mind, which is in its turn a center of energy in the world of thought. At the same time, this Antahkarana is interwoven with the thread of life, or the Sutratma, which emerges from the heart center. Okay, the objective of evolution and form is now relatively complete. This is really so good and so necessary. So I'm going to copy this as well. I think it helps us to read this preliminary material. Okay, let's see if I can, well, it's a bit of a surprise for me that I was doing this, but okay, I am. And this is ENA 27 and 29, I think. Is that correct? Oh, at least 28. All right, here comes 29. When this stage has been reached, the sensitive feeding out into the environing universe still continues. Man weaves a thread which is like the thread the spider weaves so amazingly. He reaches out still further into this possible environment and then discovers an aspect of himself which he had little dreamt in the early stages of his development, he discovers the soul and then passes through the illusion of duality. And this is a necessary but not permanent stage. It is one which characterizes the aspirant of this world cycle. Perhaps I should say this manvantara, or world period. Whoa, so there he equates three words: world cycle, manvantara, and world period. I'm going to bring that into I think it's important to make this ENA 29, and I'm going to copy that, if I can, over here into the AAB extracts, and say that the world period, manvantara, and what is the other word? World cycle, world period, manvantara, and world cycle are equivalent terms. So if you ever get this, you will have the benefit of these various extracts. Now I will continue here. You know, this is from Education in the New Age, and as I've examined this, I've seen that the Alice Bailey and the editors, maybe the Tibetan too, have brought forward from Education into the New Age into Rays and the Initiations quite a bit of what was said in Education in the New Age. This last paragraph, see, we have here that the Antahkarana is interwoven with the thread of life, or the Sutratma, which emerges from the heart center. So this is why we have for man a kind of a dual life and consciousness thread. Let's say, oops, I don't want to do that. Sorry for this little delay here. Indicating a dual life and consciousness thread. Okay. Now, there's just one more paragraph which I think would be useful to us. No sense reading everything in Education in the New Age, because we have actually seen that it has been imported, the majority of it. When this stage has been reached, the sensitive feeling out into the environing universe still continues. And we can call this the sensitive feeling out is what the Antahkarana does. Man weaves a thread which is like the thread the spider weaves so amazingly. He reaches out still further into his possible environment and then discovers an aspect of himself which he had little dreamt in the earlier stages. He discovers the soul and then passes through the illusion of duality, and can be quite a lengthy illusion. He thinks of himself as being two things. Later, these two are fused together into a kind of continuous consciousness. This is a necessary but not permanent stage. It is one which characterizes the aspirant of this world cycle, manvantara, world period, round, whatever we want to call it. Perhaps I should say manvantara or world period. He seeks to merge himself with the soul, to identify himself, the conscious personality, with the overshadowing soul. It is at this point, technically speaking, that the true building of the Antahkarana must be begun. It is a bridge between the personality and the soul. And so when we have one who is somewhat merged with or in the soul, then the true building of the Antahkarana can begin. And that's the one that DK instructs us about in the rays and the initiations. Okay, that's been a little bit of a little digression, but we want to make sure that we have brought in what was necessary from the earlier book. These two energies, which are recognized by the human being as knowledge and life, or as intelligence and living energy, are the two poles of his being. The task ahead of him now is to develop consciously the middle or balancing principle, the sort of neutral electricity, the solar fire, which is love or group relationship. And now I think we can go on with the text. Well, actually, it doesn't give us the chance to do that because we're going to, excuse me, begin with an entirely new section. So, okay, we have then reviewed the 5 threads and their extension into the creative thread. We have seen the union of the atma, and Antahkarana, or the life thread and the consciousness thread. And we have seen that Antahkarana Antahkarana begins, the Antahkarana process really begins far earlier than the advanced phase of it, about which the Tibetan instructs us in the rays and the initiations. Okay, well, this needs to be reviewed. From the soul to the heart and to the head, from the heart to the spleen, uniting the physical and etheric body, from the solar plexus to the emotional body, uniting the etheric physical body and the emotional body, and thence to the love petals, from the head center through the other 2 bodies and through the mental body, uniting them all, so etheric, physical, emotional, and mental, and thence to the knowledge petals. And then when we have the fusion of the soul and personality, the sacrifice petals are also involved, and these sacrifice petals are linking to, again, to the heart center and to the head center. But it seems to me that the linking is from the reverse direction. The threads from the soul link to the head and the heart, but there is also there are also threads going forth from the heart and head, which link to the sacrifice petals. So that seems to be a kind of a double linking. It retraces the steps which the soul has made in mastering its instrument. But Antahkarana is built from the outside in, from the periphery towards the center, and that center is considered as the soul, and therefore there is that important link from the 2 centers, the head and the heart, upward towards the sacrifice petals, just as there has been from the solar plexus to the love petals, and from the head in an earlier phase to the knowledge petals. Well, I think we get, we can't see these things as the Tibetan can see them, but we can get some visual, some imaginary image of these various energy streams and how they manage to link together the subtle apparatus of man, and also a number of the chakras involved, and they eventually link the man consciously to the soul. Now let's just say that with the 2 threads from the soul, the man is indeed linked but not consciously so. When the threads move upwards from the man towards the soul, then the linking is conscious. And of course, that conscious linking has to continue with the building of the Antahkarana proper, which connects the mental unit to the monastic permanent atom, and then there's the higher parts of the Antahkarana involving the Buddhic permanent atom, the atmic permanent atom, and eventually even the monad. And that is given in the third meditation that we find in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. Well, okay. Please forgive me if there are some, concrete obscurities here. At least I've done what I can to go over the material, and you can study it more specifically and focally than I've been able to do here. And if you have more 5th grade and 7th grade than I do, then you will make a clearer picture of it than I've been able to present to you. But at least I think we have something of the idea of the mechanism which is involved and which must be activated in the building of the Antahkarana. Really, the earlier part of the Antahkarana, or this sensitive outreaching, has to be established before the Antahkarana proper can be begun. So for a long time, man has been, let us say, becoming conscious over millions and millions of years, reaching out sensitively into the environment. Let me just see if I can find, I'll use that word, environment, and environment. And let's see if we can see if there's anything here. No, maybe not. Well, it does exist, that's for sure. We've been talking about that sensitive. Let's see if I use the word sensitive. Will that allow me? Yes. When this stage, it's environing. When this stage has been reached, the sensitive feeling out into the environing universe still continues. This is what Antahkarana is. This is what Antahkarana really is by another term, the sensitive feeling out into the environing, the surrounding universe. This is what we sometimes need alternative ways of thinking about certain words that we use. And this is, I think, a very good one. Let's see if there's any more sensitive. No. Environing. And I think, no. How about this? 118? Yes. Okay. Well, anyway, we have some initial thoughts gathered here, and I trust that they are useful. Now we begin a new section. So what do we have so far? We have the idea that about Antahkarana in different terms. We have the idea that Antahkarana means inner organ. That's one thing it means. It is the consciousness thread, and it involves a sensitive reaching out into the environing universe. And there are a number of phases through which the Antahkarana process passes before the building of the Antahkarana proper, which connects the mental unit with the monastic permanent atom and still higher phases of the spiritual triad and even the monad. All right. I keep on trying to make it clearer and clearer. I'm never quite satisfied with it, but I think maybe we have gone about as far as we can go in that. So the nature of the Antahkarana. All right, so this is going to be a 5-page section. Let's see what is involved here. One of the difficulties connected with the study of the Antahkarana is the fact that hitherto the work done upon the Antahkarana has been entirely unconscious. Okay, so this use of the word Antahkarana suggests Antahkarana in a larger sense. In other words, this sensitive, this process of becoming aware through the extension of an energy thread. Therefore, the concept in men's minds relating to this form of creative work, well, we are making something happen. We are building something that wasn't there before. Therefore, it's a creative. We are building something which was not there before. Therefore, it's creative. And this construction of the bridge meets at first with little response from the mind nature. In other words, we don't have anything really to relate it to in our experience. Not much in our experience relates to the process to be undertaken. Also, in order to express these ideas, we have practically to create a new terminology, for there are no words suitable to define our meaning. I suppose, as he has said, one day the language of the monad will be created, but right now it does not exist. Okay. So there are no words suitable to define our meaning, just as modern sciences have evolved a complete new terminology. Well, maybe it's never complete, but it's quite distinct from terminology previously used of their own during the past 40 years. So what do we have there from the early 1900s? So this science of the Antahkarana, right, must develop its own peculiar vocabulary. In the meantime, we must do the best we can with the words at our disposal. All right. So this was the first point, the first point and difficulty. Now we come to a second point. Okay, here we go. The second point I would make is to ask those who are studying along these lines to realize that in time they will arrive at understanding, but that at present all they can do is to depend upon the unalterable tendency of the subconscious nature to penetrate to the surface of consciousness as a reflex activity in the establishing of continuity of consciousness. So this is something that assists. Assists the establishing of continuity of consciousness. The reflex activity of the lower nature corresponds to the development of continuity between the super consciousness and the consciousness which develops upon the path of discipleship. In other words, much which has for long been hidden will come to the surface. It is all a part in 3 stages of the integrating process, proving to the disciple that all life is, in terms of consciousness, one of revelation. And we are to ponder on this, the past, as well as the not yet contacted future, or higher realms, must be revealed. Okay. Now, I think I want to know how big that is. And that's probably oh, that's a 9. All right, I'm going to make it more an 11. Okay. So there will be a coming to the surface of all that has been experienced, and it will be linked up with all that is being experienced and all that has yet to be experienced. The superconscious is, as far as we're concerned, really the future. It has not yet been integrated into the consciousness of man within the personality and within the using the physical brain. Another of the difficulties, all right, well, let's see what we have here. Let's see, third difficulty, okay. Another of the difficulties in considering any of these esoteric sciences that deal with what has been called the conscious unfoldment of the divine recognitions. Not that they just happen to us automatically and periodically and unpredictably, but that they happen when we will. Okay, so these are meant to happen when we will them to happen. Okay, the conscious unfoldment of divine recognitions, which is true awareness, is the ancient habit of humanity to materialize all knowledge, or let's say to think of all knowledge in terms of concrete forms. Everything man learns is applied, as the centuries pass, to the world of natural phenomena and of natural process. Yes, because this is the orientation, this is the outward orientation of man presently, and not to the recognition of the self, the knower, the beholder, the observer. This is not within man's customary range of interest, not within man's customary range of interest. He is extroverted. He has not yet reached that point which develops with the unfoldment of the central tier of petals, the love petals, where the pairs of opposites are becoming a reality in his registration, in his consciousness. He is still within the hall of ignorance and is outwardly turned. When therefore man enters upon the path, he has to educate himself in the process of using knowledge in reference to the conscious self-aware identity or to the self-contained self-initiating, and notice there's a capitalization here, individual. The term individual is capitalized and thus means man's identity as a soul. As a soul. When he can do this, he is transmuting knowledge into wisdom. So this requires the inner, this requires the reorientation of knowledge and a type of spiritual introversion, not, as DK has sometimes told us, the morbid introversion of the self-concerned, almost self-obsessed aspirant, but a turning inward towards higher, more rapid fields of vibration with scientific interests, with interest, with objectivity, turning into the subjective worlds with objectivity, let's call it that. Turning into the subjective worlds with objectivity. It is possible to study these worlds with the same kind of objectivity as we have studied the outer worlds, and the knowledges discovered on the outer planes are directly related to knowledges which can be discovered on the inner planes and are really expressions of those inner and higher types of knowledge. All right, so there are some difficulties. There are language difficult. There's the fact of that this process has been going on unconsciously for so long. Okay, so the difficulties, one, the unconsciousness of the process, the language, the language which does not yet exist to be used to describe the process, and the tendency to materialize all knowledge. These are difficulties that the Tibetan faces when he wants to present this work on the Antahkarana and have us at least preliminarily understand it. Okay, previously I spoke of knowledge wisdom. It's a bit Mercurian. Love wisdom is more of Venusian. I spoke of knowledge wisdom, which are words synonymous with force energy. That is so important, you know. You just notice things here. And obviously knowledge is related to force and wisdom to energy. Knowledge used is force expressing itself. Wisdom used is energy in action. And if you'll excuse me, I just feel that I have to put that in the AAB extracts. Okay, page 453. So, raise and initiations, 453. And this will be, well, it will all make sense later and be of value later. Knowledge and wisdom as force and energy. Knowledge and wisdom as force and energy. Okay, so this will go into the AAB extracts. There we go. So, we will go on now. Knowledge used is force expressing itself. Wisdom used is energy in action. Now, so often DK discriminates between force and energy and force. The discrimination is not cut and dried or as easy as we might think. Oftentimes we hear about the Shambhala force, and we certainly cannot say that that's only knowledge at work and that the Shambhala energy is wisdom at work. But usually when discriminating the soul from the personality, knowledge relates to the personality and wisdom to the soul. So at least that is an abiding type of discrimination, even though the words get perhaps less distinct in their meanings as we rise into the higher planes and vibratory levels. In these words you have the expression of a great spiritual law, one which you would do well to consider carefully. So what we say, you know, ponder on this, point of attention, that won't do. Ponder on this. Okay. Knowledge used is force expressing itself, and it has more concrete application. Wisdom perhaps is more general and represents an energy, I think an energy which can be applied when united with specific knowledge of the area of application. So in these words, knowledge is force expressing itself, wisdom, knowledge used is force expressing itself, wisdom used is energy in action. In these words, you have the expression of a great spiritual law and one which you would be well to consider carefully. Knowledge force concerns the personality and the world of material values. But of course, you know, we do have knowledge of higher planes. So here the distinction begins to break down a little bit. Wisdom energy expresses itself through the consciousness thread and the creative thread, as they constitute in themselves a woven dual strand. Well, I think we're going to weave all of these strands together, are we not? Are we not going to weave all of these strands together? Because we've already seen that in the life thread, the consciousness thread accompanies it. But perhaps, the question is from what direction? From the innermost to the outermost, or vice versa? In any case, for the man, consciousness and creativity are going to work together, because there's a five-fold thread which is extended into the throat center, which creates the creative thread, and much of this five-fold thread is about consciousness per se. So wisdom energy expresses itself through the consciousness thread and the creative thread, as they constitute in themselves a woven dual thread. And man, let's see here, man is the weaver in this case. They are for the disciple a fusion of the past, the consciousness thread, and the present, the creative thread. In other words, we can call this, that's not correct, sorry, what man decides to do with his past experiences to better adapt to the divine plan, at least at a certain point. It might be more selfish before that occurs, what he decides to do with his past experience, but at a certain point he will say, well, based upon what I know, what I've discovered, what my consciousness has revealed, I will create the following. I will arrange and rearrange the following so that it better approximates the divine archetype. Okay, so they are for the disciple a fusion of the past, consciousness thread, and the present, the creative thread, and together they form what is usually called, upon the path of return, the Antahkarana. So this is the discussion of the Antahkarana as dual in this context. But this is not entirely accurate, he says. The wisdom energy thread is the sutratma, or life thread. For the sutratma, when blended with the consciousness thread, is again also called the Antahkarana. So this is where the confusion can arise. The Antahkarana is called two things, is often seen as dual in two ways. Consciousness and creativity on the one hand, and also life and consciousness on the other hand. So perhaps it might clarify the issue somewhat if I pointed out that these threads eternally exist in time and space. They appear distinct and separate until a man is a probationary disciple. In other words, perhaps before he has taken the first initiation, from one way of considering the probationary disciple, and therefore becoming conscious of himself and not only of the not-self. So a kind of realized duality is necessary before the threads can begin to be linked together and used together. There is the life thread or sutratma and the consciousness thread, the one anchored in the heart and the other in the head. Throughout all the past centuries, the creative thread, in one or other of its three aspects, oh goodness, it's getting complex, maybe three aspects related, to the three aspects of divinity and to the three vehicles has been slowly woven by the man. It's what he does with the energies of his vehicles. What man does with the energies of his vehicles. Of this fact in nature, his creative activity during the past 200 years is an indication. So that today the creative thread is a unity. Its three aspects are united, generally speaking, as regards humanity as a whole, and specifically of the individual disciple, and forms a closely woven thread upon the mental plane. So it uses the resources of the mind, emotions, and the etheric physical body as well. So, if we were going to divide this, a threefold creative thread, a consciousness thread, and a life thread, we would have kind of a five-fold way of looking at this, but the creative thread is now united, a closely woven thread upon the mental plane, and from that mental plane, a man can direct his mental, emotional, and etheric physical resources to create. So, from the mental plane, a man can direct creatively his mental, emotional, let's get that right, mental, emotional, and etheric physical resources in the act of creation. Well, this gets intricate, does it not? So, these three major threads, which are in reality six, if the creative thread is differentiated into its component parts, form the Antahkarana world. So the Antahkarana ends up being all of these energies together. And let's just say, I wonder how this might go. Three, we might say three from the personality, two from the soul, and one from the monad. Maybe that's the way. Perhaps this is the way the six appear. So Antahkarana ends up being, Antahkarana is a composite structure and not just the consciousness thread. Of course, even the consciousness thread can be considered threefold because, I want to put that down. Even the consciousness thread can be considered threefold because there are three types of consciousness correlated with the three aspects of the personality. In any case, they embody the past and present experience and are so recognized by the aspirants. Now we have the consciousness thread as representing the past, and the creative thread the present. At least that's what he said a little earlier. It is only upon the path itself that the phrase building the Antahkarana becomes accurate and appropriate. We can say prior to that, what we call the preliminary Antahkarana has been unconsciously I'd like to spell it here, built. In other words, we're told that we have been sensitively reaching out into the environing universe unconsciously before this time, and we have become sensitively aware, and we have not known that we are doing this. It's a process that just goes along with the process of living. It is not a conscious will to penetrate into unknown areas of experience and vibration. So it is only upon the path that the phrase, the building of the Antahkarana, becomes accurate and appropriate. It is in this connection that confusion is apt to arise in the minds of the student. And when DK warns us of impending confusion, he has the experience of seeing many who have reached a certain point in their studies who have become confused. And, you know, it's kind of easy, the fusion of many things together, which should be held distinct in the mind. He forgets that it is a purely arbitrary distinction of the lower analyzing mind to call this stream of energy the Sutratma, and another stream of energy the consciousness thread, and a third stream of energy the creative thread. So in this case, let's just say the use of arbitrary distinctions can be the cause of illusion or misapprehension. All right. They are essentially, all three of them together, the Antahkarana in the process of forming. This is really so important, because just a little while ago he was basically saying, well, Antahkarana is the consciousness thread, but it is more a synthetic term, is what we're learning to see here. We are learning that Antahkarana is a synthetic term and indicates unions of threads rather than only one thread. So it has life in it, it has consciousness in it, it has creativity in it, it has all three aspects. Antahkarana, as the term is used synthetically, has all three aspects in it. So it is equally arbitrary to call the bridge which the disciple builds from the lower mental plane via the egoic central vortex the Antahkarana. Okay, well now, you know, is this the bridge into the egoic lotus, or the bridge which uses egoic energy but which bypasses the egoic lotus? Okay, so obviously we're dealing with various distinctions here which have been put forth in the teaching at various times. I mean, what DK says in one place may have to be modified when we read a little bit further on. So it's arbitrary. In other words, it's just that we decide to do it. That's this means that simply that we decide to call these things by certain names. So it is equally arbitrary to call the bridge which the disciple builds from the lower mental plane via the egoic central vortex the Antahkarana. But when we use the word via, it seems to be going somewhere else. If we use the word, is it via, via, you know, the building seems to be going somewhere other than the egoic lotus or causal body. So maybe he's saying that, you know, even the Antahkarana as we usually consider it, from the mental unit to the monastic permanent atom, is also an arbitrary term, a term we have just decided to use to name a certain portion of a rather complex and long-enduring process. but for, see, so we're into this language business that he talks about, why it is difficult, but for purposes of comprehending study, because things do have to be taken apart in order to be properly studied, but for purposes of comprehending, studying, and practical experience, we will define the Antahkarana as the extension of the threefold thread woven unconsciously through life experimentation and the response of consciousness to environment through the process of projecting consciously the triple blended energies of the personality as they are impulsed by the soul across a gap in consciousness which has hitherto existed. Well, okay, we're going to have to repeat that. I'm sure you will agree. And this is the definition of Antahkarana, and it is on page, well, where is it? 454, and we will, okay, we're going to put that, you know where, you know. Whoops, I thought I had that taken care of, but maybe not. So this is going to be, okay, this is going to be R and I 454, and we're going to call this definition of the Antahkarana. Antahkarana. Okay. So, by now you've gotten used to me doing this. It's a bit of a sacrifice to delay moving on, but it will serve all in the later process, and I will say, put it in two different ways. I'll call this, so that it's easier to locate, Antahkarana definition. Okay. We will define the Antahkarana as the extension of the threefold thread, hitherto woven unconsciously through life experimentation and the response of consciousness to environment. Now, you know, by, if I can say, by experimentation, we might be talking about creative act. Life experimentation, so we'll call this creative acts, and the response of consciousness to environment, so we'll call this conscious response related to the consciousness thread. So this extension occurs through the projecting consciously by an act of will, consciously, let us say, through an act of will, the triple blended energies of the personality. So it involves drawing up the ethers and the aspiration into the mentality. The triple blended energies of the personality as they are impulsed by the soul because of soul infusion. It's a very complicated, you know, because of soul infusion across a gap in consciousness which has hitherto existed. So we really have to ponder on this. The energies of the Antahkarana really involve an extension of what has been created through experiment and response. And then comes a willful, conscious projection of these energies, and that projection is impulsed by the infusion of the soul into the projecting point. We center in a projecting point, and fortified by the infusion of the soul, we imaginatively project symbolically and imaginatively, yes, across a kind of gap in consciousness which we visualize, and by means of that projection come in contact with that which we have not yet been able to contact. Well, this is just, you know, intricate, extended, and very important definition. Basically what DK has done here, he's given us various definitions of Antahkarana. You know, at first it was the consciousness thread, then it was a combination of creative thread and consciousness thread, then it was a combination of the life thread and the consciousness thread. I think what I'll say here, I'll mark that down. DK has given us various definitions of Antahkarana. So at first, he's called it, and let's see if I can get this correct, consciousness thread. Then a blend of the creative thread and the consciousness thread. And earlier, a blend of the life thread proper and the consciousness thread, consciousness thread often called Antahkarana itself. So these are, these are at least three ways that DK has defined Antahkarana, but said that none of them is entirely accurate, and then he has given us a more accurate definition. Okay, so that's what we're seeking to understand here. All right, and we go on. Two events can then occur. The magnetic response of the spiritual triad, atma-buddhi-manas, which is the expression of the monad, is evoked. For what reason, based on what type of superplanar physics, we don't yet know. But let's just say the spiritual triad is the personality expression of the monad, and is evoked by the act of projection. A triple stream of spiritual energy is slowly projected towards the egoic lotus and towards the lower man. And note, we would really have to note this because it's so intricate. Sometimes DK says, well, look, this subject is just too intricate for us to discuss. But in this particular case, he is discussing an intricate subject with us, and we can understand why sometimes he might refrain from giving us the full intricacy of a particular subject. So notice that the evoked response goes towards the egoic lotus as well as towards the soul-infused projecting point at the mental unit. And that's something that I had not taken sufficiently into consideration. I think it's so good, to be forced to consider this teaching in a word-for-word manner, word-by-word manner. So a triple stream of spiritual energy is slowly, and notice this is not an immediate, sudden, huge, overpowering response. This is, we have to say here, note the word slowly, and think that the results of the act of projection will take time. Okay. So the magnetic response of the spiritual triad atma-buddhi-manas, which is the expression of the monad, the personality expression, so to speak, is evoked. A triple stream of spiritual energy is slowly projected towards the egoic lotus and towards the lower man. So this triple stream will include spiritual will, spiritual perception or love, which is buddhi, and spiritual mind bringing in an aspect of the illuminating power. So keep in mind that this is a triple return evocation. Triple. And it's not just that, we're going to be touching the monastic permanent atom and the return is purely monastic. Well, maybe it's mostly monastic, but eventually this Antahkarana is going to rise into the higher parts of the triad. We're speaking here in symbols, and we're speaking in a way that helps us picture that, but of course the reality is probably far different in energy terms. But we'll touch the higher part of the spiritual triad and eventually the highest part of the spiritual triad, and then indeed there will be a triple return. So the initial evoked return may be mostly monastic, but increasingly involved with pure reason and archetypal perception of things as they are, intuitive perception, and will increasingly, as time goes on, carry the conviction of the spiritual will. All right, so where are we here? Where in two events can then occur. So there is this projection across the gap in consciousness. In other words, just something we don't know. Two events can then occur after the projection across the gap in consciousness. I remember when I first started to study this material, maybe even before I got into Weavers and the Light in the Arcane School, because, I remember the Arcane School conference of 1975, almost 39 years ago. And it was going to be the Shambhala Impact, and so many people came for that. The big room was full. There were more than, I think, maybe 300 people. And I saw some of the luminaries in the esoteric field there. I saw Dane Rudyard there, and there were others. They were drawn in for this very important moment. I'm trying to remember whether the impact occurred precisely during our evening session at the Taurus full moon, or whether it was probably a bit later. I could, look it up in terms of New York, 39 years ago. So one begins to review one's life and see where one has been in terms of energy impact. Okay, then the personality then begins to bridge the gap which exists on its side between the monastic permanent atom and the mental unit, between the higher abstract mind and the lower mind. So it's as if the evoked triple response stimulates bridging from the side of the personality. Maybe, thinking towards the abstract mind using the faculties which one has. So using the mental faculties. So it's a kind of a stretch. Anyway, the point is the greater evokes the lesser. And maybe, well, almost certainly, we would not do what we do in terms of upreach unless we were evoked by the descending stream of evoked triadal energy. Well, we just have to remember we're dealing with a new language. So what is our what's happened here? Okay. A triple thread unconsciously created is projected, is extended upwards. This extension is accomplished through projection. Projection evokes a triple downflow from the spiritual triad into the soul and into the projecting center at the mental unit. And then then the personality is so it's really the increasingly soul-infused personality is so stimulated that it works on the process of bridging, BRIDG, bridging towards, or from its mentality towards the higher mentality of the abstract mind. All right, well, one tries to put together some of these syntheses to keep in mind what is happening, but of course, when we're in the middle of the process, we're not going to just stop and academically review everything. Maybe in the beginning, when we do this, there may be a rather halting flow in which we have to check and recheck what we think we're doing, but eventually a flow will be established. And it will all seem like one flowing synthetic process, and maybe after a time we will not have to go through all of the specific phases in an isolated and discrete manner, but there will just be this rapport with the area of the spiritual triad, and there will be a mutual interpenetration of a Mercurian kind, and it will just work for us. Okay. Accomplished through, not thorough, through projection. Okay, so let's go on just a little bit. Technically, and upon the path of discipleship, this bridge between the personality in its three aspects and the monad and its three aspects is called the Antahkarana. So another definition from page 454, of course there are already compilations on the Antahkarana, I'm sure, but RNI 454, another definition of the Antahkarana. Okay. And AAB extracts, another definition of the Antahkarana. We're ready to go, and we just hit it, and there it is. Okay, so technically, and once we have reached the path of discipleship and are not considering the preliminary stages of unconscious construction of the Antahkarana, this bridge between the personality in its three aspects and the monad and its three aspects, because the monad is definitely, considered here, and in the alignment exercise, which we have in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, the monad is the destination of the alignment. In other words, we want to end our perception in the realization of being. When we touch the monad, well, I'm sure many things may be conferred, but generally the realization of being is conferred. Okay, this Antahkarana is the product of the united effort of the soul and personality working together consciously to produce this bridge. I'm remembering from the old arcane school days, how certain sentences stand out for you, and how the students of that period, when they were assembling the work for coming students to accomplish, isolated certain sentences as being important, and this was one of them. This Antahkarana is the product of the united effort of the soul and personality. Let us say the soul having infused the personality. Now, I'm not exactly sure whether I have, okay, the soul and personality, or of the soul-infused personality, with the soul having, to a necessary degree, infused the personality, working together consciously, and presumably the higher self is involved in this process. To what extent the soul or angel is involved in this process is not really given, but it says, when there's conscious working, together that we as a soul-infused personality and the soul on its own plane may be involved as well, consciously to produce the bridge. So the question is, to what degree is the soul on its own plane, working in this process? Or is it the man realizing himself to be the soul because of soul infusion who is doing this? And also, to what extent does the solar angel, as the angel of the presence, involve itself in this process? The Antahkarana is the product of the united effort of the soul and personality working together to produce this bridge. Well, okay, I'm up to my old tricks here. I have to I have to make these bigger so they stand out, and so that those who are reviewing this, and so I myself, if I review it, can have my eye drawn to the important points rapidly. This Antahkarana is the product of the united effort of soul and personality working together consciously to produce this bridge. To what extent do I realize I am the soul? To what do I realize I am that apparently something other, but within this normal field of perception? Or do I rise to the plane of light and love and focus on that higher mental plane as if it were my primary focus? And can I do that at will? Or can I do that ever? Does it ever happen? These are questions we have to ask ourselves when we are looking at the united effort of the soul and personality, because soul and personality can be engaged in the united effort when there is soul infusion, the presence of the sense of the soul and the presence of the personality simultaneously. But also there is a higher agency that we call the solar angel, expressing itself as the angel of the presence within the egoic lotus. See, the solar angel per se extends an aspect of itself into the egoic lotus, but only an aspect. It's not the entirety of the solar angel, because that is a body. The egoic lotus is a body and is not the solar angel per se. The solar angel has other things to do with respect to the higher planes, and so somehow has that kind of consciousness in which it can be aware of a lower dimension through extension. Having pervaded the entire universe of the egoic lotus, with a fragment of myself, I remain greater and above all that into which I have extended myself. All right, when it is completed, there is perfect rapport between the monad and its physical plane expression. The initiate in the outer world, and of course, is telling us that it won't be completed except in the case of the initiate, that this Antahkarana will not be completed except in the case of the initiate. So before the time we are the true initiate of the third degree, we are simply working at the sensitive reaching out, the sensitive reaching up, the factor of projection. We're simply working at that and have not yet assimilated or managed to evoke a full response from the spiritual triad and to assimilate that response. The third initiation marks the consummation of the process, and there is then a straight line of relationship between the monad and the lower self. Okay, well, okay, and I would say, though, that this is a consummation, but not yet fully complete. The fourth initiation marks the complete realization of this relation by the initiate. So let's just say that something has happened energetically at the third degree which is not fully recognized, or recognition, RCZD, recognized until the fourth degree. So somehow, you know, the monad is contacted at the third degree, but by no means is there a full realization of all that the monad represents or sees, etc. And that continues to grow, I would suppose, until the sixth initiation. But the third degree is really important for the realization of this monadic energy, or let's just say for an initial realization of the monadic energy, which is the energy of being, and for the infusion of this energy into the consciousness. It's an energic thing, but then it keeps growing through the fourth initiation, and I would say even through the fifth initiation, in which I think there is a kind of retraction of the Antahkarana into the sun, or a retraction of Mercury, which is a planet of extension, into the sun. Mercury and the sun are one, and I think at the fifth initiation we realize that Mercury and the sun are one, Antahkarana and its source are one. At the fifth initiation we realize that Mercury and the sun are one. A retraction, okay, of Mercury into the sun. That's what I think we realize at that point. So, you know, if there is, if the will to be, or to know oneself as being, is becoming very strong, then there is the man is interesting himself in matters pertaining to the third initiation. Whether or not he achieves that is another matter, but at least that is the curriculum. The curriculum is the initial realization of being. Okay, so the curriculum for the third initiation, no, not third degree, third initiation, is the initial realization of being. Okay. There's so much here of depth, you know, and we have to think it through, of course, but we also have to use it and become familiar with the energies which our invocation has evoked, so that, you know, the energies are experienced and not just talked about. Talking is a preliminary stage, thinking a preliminary stage, and the actually experiencing of the contact of the energies evoked is another and higher stage, and that's what we have to be able to do. So the fourth initiation marks the complete realization of this relation of the monad and the lower personal self. At a certain point, the monad is going to have to be by the initiate. Let's just say here of this relation, so eventually, EVNTL, eventually it will be a relationship between the monad no, and the mayavirupa. So the monad will have its own self-devised, self-imagined, self-projected instrument upon the physical plane, and no longer the personality. So the personality per se will disappear at the fourth initiation. And after that point, what stands for the personality instrument will be something projected by the master through Kriya Shakti, through the power of the materializing of the imagination, interestingly connected with the sign Virgo. Okay, the fourth initiation marks the complete realization of this relation by the initiate. So we are groping our way in this more advanced curriculum of the rays and initiations towards certain preliminary monadic realizations that have to do with being. It enables him to say that I and my Father are one, as the Christ said, from a higher perspective, still higher perspective. It is for this reason that the crucifixion, or the great renunciation, takes place, and let's just say getting rid of all impediments to this realization of oneness with the Father aspect. Forget not that it is the soul that is crucified. Now, this is interesting. You know, it's only incidentally that the personality dies. It is the Christ who dies. It is not the man. It is not Jesus, although this was also a secondary event. The main thing is the egoic lotus, or causal body, dies away as an intermediary. So, and as a veil. This death is a removal of the veil, and things are perceived as never before possible when the causal body, egoic lotus, existed. It is not the man, it is not Jesus, though, as I say, you know, there's an incidental here. Although the death of the personality does not always occur, and there are some of those who pass through the fourth degree without dying in their personality nature, and maybe that is more common in the East than it is in the West, but definitely there are some who do this. The causal body disappears, the man is monadically conscious, and perhaps, let's just say, it is the angel of the presence who introduces the monad in extension to the monad per se. We are the monad in extension, and we have to be the monad per se, i.e. the presence. So it is the angel of the presence who introduces us to the presence, and in a sense, in doing that, disappears finally at the fourth degree. The angel of the presence is gone, only the presence exists. At the fourth degree, only presence exists. The angel of the presence has gone and is no longer a veil. Upon monadic realization, albeit of a preliminary kind, not the kind that a sixth degree initiate or chohan would have. The soul body no longer serves any useful purpose. Its treasury is sublimated, raised up into the spiritual triad. It's not lost, it's simply put into a higher form. I've often said, Master DK is a master without no longer having that causal body, was able to remember many things from his earlier experience. I'm remembering I was a young man, and he talked about personality happenings. So those memories which were in the lower part of the causal body are not lost. They are sublimated into a higher level from which still more creativity is possible. The soul body no longer serves any useful purpose. It is no more needed. Nothing is left but the sutratma, which is, let's call that life, being, qualified by consciousness, a consciousness which still preserves identity whilst merged in the whole. Now, in other words, a consciousness, which has achieved identification. Okay, and what is identification? It is realization, occult experience, esoteric experience, and absorption into the whole. So there is the sense of the whole, and also the sense of the fragment of the whole, which the individual represents, and that fragment realizes that it is both itself and the whole. How can I be the part and the whole at the same time? Well, how can I be the part and the whole at the same time? But this is the kind of realization that we have, and DK talks about this realization of unity. Let's see if I can go here to raise and the initiations apart from individual, and let's see if we can find that. Okay, here it is. This is really important. Therefore, after the fourth, here I'll do this, and I'll make it highlighted. Therefore, after the fourth initiation, when the work of the soul is accomplished, and the soul body fades out of the picture, maybe not in one blast, supernova blast, or fades is interesting. Only the quality which it has imparted in substance is left after its contribution, individual, group, or planetary, to the sum total of manifestation. We impart the quality that we have earned over the many, many years. All that remains is a point of light. This point is conscious, immutable, and aware of the two extremes of the divine expression. Here it is. This is what I'm talking about. The sense of individual identity and the sense of universality. As a matter of fact, this is so important that I'm going to just transpose it into this section here, and I'm going to make it green, which is kind of the color I've been using for these imports. Okay, but let's just see, it's got all be there. And I want to make it also smaller. Okay, so therefore, after the fourth initiation, etc., this point is conscious, immutable, and aware of the two extremes of divine expression, the sense of individuality and the sense of universality, individual identity and the sense of universality, simultaneously aware of both. Whatever page this is, I've just been on page 106. I'll read a little more. Okay, so this is R and I 106. These are fused and blended in the one. Okay, of this one, the divine hermaphrodite is the concrete symbol. The union in one of the pairs of opposites, negative and positive, male and female. And you know, so much of the Buddhist imagery about union concerns the male and the female in the Kala Chakra and other rituals. So Buddhist imagery should be considered. In the state of being which we call monadic, this is the point. No difference is recognized between these two, because if I can bring such ideas down to the level of intelligence of the aspirant, it is realized that there is no identity apart from universality, and no appreciation of the universal apart from the individual realization, even if this individual realization is somehow the realization of the individual universal logos. Let me put that in, as it's kind of a strange idea. but I will say that, I'll say it, that even if this individual realization is the realization of the individual universal logos, and this realization of identification with both the part and the whole, so important. This is just gold here, finds its point of tension in the will to be, which is qualified by the will to good and developed from the angle, consciousness angle, by the will to know. So what does it do? It finds its point of tension. That's the key. In other words, it is achieved when the will to be works through the will to good, which takes into consideration the relationships of all the factors. And these relationships are learned about and realized by the gradual use of the will to know. I find this to be a paragraph which gives us an understanding of what monadic realization is, maybe better than any, because it's not that we are only the one and have to forget about the fact that we are being an extension or the externalization of the one infinite being. We are the externalization of the one infinite being, and so are all the other contents of consciousness which we register. Ultimately, we are the one and only that projects its extensions, but for practical living in time and space, we have to realize that we are individual and projections of the one infinite being. Well, you know, one gets closer and closer to this type of realization. I am the monad, I am the whole, and I am the monad in extension, which is an attenuation of my true identity as wholeness. I exist as the part, I exist as the whole. All right, you know, and one could just labor upon that a long time, coming to deeper and deeper realizations. Nothing is left but the Sutratma qualified by consciousness. So the Sutratma, you know, related to the will to be, the consciousness related to the will to good, a consciousness which still preserves identity whilst merged with the whole. Sutratma and consciousness. And I wonder what page this is. I suppose it's 455. And of course I'm tempted, R and I, 455, and we will say part and whole, consciousness and Sutratma. Consciousness always is going to initially at least give us the part. Sutratma is forever being or the whole, and I will put that in, you know. Collecting for the future, I trust that you will have this for the future. And if you want to piece things together, then you will be able to do this. Another qualification is creativity. Thus, consciousness can be focused at will on the physical plane in an outer body or form, and this body will be created by the master. So let's just say, no, that's not correct. A higher form of creativity. The mayavirupa is the representative of a higher form of creativity. So we use the consciousness we have and the sense of life that we are to create according to the plan. Earlier, we use the consciousness we have and the sense of life and wholeness and being, we have, oh, come on, being, we have achieved to create in alignment with the plan, divine plan. Okay. But the once there is this penetration, once there is this part and whole relationship, once there is mastership, then the creativity of creating the mayavirupa can occur. Now let's just see how much, there is a diagram here, and the diagram will have to be inserted. And we will be moving towards 457, and I will try to bring this diagram into focus if I possibly can. What I'm going to do is just touch on this next section and maybe say a bit more later. But this task of unfoldment, of evolution, and of development, but in this task, the mind of man has to understand, analyze, formulate, and distinguish. Okay, so that's why it's so slow in the beginning. Therefore, the temporary differentiations are of profound and useful importance until there can be a synthesis, until there can be a fluid synthesis. We might therefore conclude that the task of the disciple is, 1, to become conscious of the following situations, if I may use such a word. Situations is interesting. Things are situated in a certain way in a relationship to each other in a certain way. Process in combination with force, status upon the path, or recognition of the available qualifying energy or energies. Not necessarily all energies of the spiritual triad are available to all those who begin to build the Antahkarana. Fusion or integration of the consciousness thread with the creative thread and with the life thread. So an intuitive or a fusion which results in their spontaneous use and creative activity. This is essential, for it is not only through the development of creative ability in the three worlds that the necessary focal point is created, but this also leads to the building of the Antahkarana, its creation. So the Antahkarana is a creation. Now, and then to construct the Antahkarana between the spiritual triad and the personality, well, really we're beginning with the personality, but okay, there is an evocation of the spiritual triad which helps with the cooperation of the soul through infusion or through the presence of the solar angel. These 3 points of divine energy might be symbolized thus. Now, unfortunately, I cannot copy this. I wish I could. But what I can do is to show the diagram. So here's the triple monad. Here's the threefold egoic lotus. Here's the monastic permanent atom, the Antahkarana, and the metal unit. And the side-standing or bystanding soul is related to the monastic permanent atom and infusing the metal unit. So all these are involved in the process. Okay, in this simple symbol, you have the picture of the disciple's task upon the path. And another diagram might clarify, and again, I cannot copy it. I wish I could. Here's the monad energizing the spiritual triad, and maybe we don't have complete, maybe a further type of Antahkarana has to be built there. We have a dotted line. The Antahkarana is both. It's from the causal body to the spiritual triad, as well as the more direct path, which is so often depicted for us, bypassing the soul. Soul, causal body, expressing itself through the 3 aspects of the mind. The higher abstract mind, the son of mind, and the concrete mind, and then the personality reflecting the threefold soul. So I think it's very interesting here to see that this dotted line, well, it's just not complete yet, but it's something that we are trying to learn to complete. Maybe the soul infusion factor is increasingly complete. Though I'll point to that. In these you have the 9 initiations, or the transmuting of the forces into divine energies. 9 initiations. Okay, so I think, that the factors, what it says to me about the 9 initiations is this, that the triple aspect of the monad is involved in the consummating the 9 initiations. So we have 7, 8, and 9, and well, the 6th initiation may begin with the monad in general, and the 7th and 8th involve monadic aspects. Maybe 7, 8, and 9, will, wisdom, and activity, the consummation of the 9th initiation. Now, does this occur on the monadic plane, or does this occur once there has been a liberation of the volatile essence within the monadic vehicle into the logoic plane? All right, I will get back to this. We've been at it about 2 hours here, and so this will be the end of Rays and Initiations webinar commentary, part 2, program number 27, pages 451 to 456, and we'll be beginning with program number 28, and we'll begin with 457. It just evokes from one a realization, or the realization that there are unknown possibilities here, and maybe a touching of some of those unknown possibilities. So we'll get on with program number 28. I hope it is that. I trust it is that. How far back do I have to go to find out that this is the case? Quite a ways back. Okay, yes, indeed, we are on 27, and we are going to work ahead in 28. So we'll see you then. We'll get more deeply into it. See you then.